Now. Boom. Okay.
There you go. Attaboy.
Well, good reminder. Thank you. Well, again, welcome. Realized we were FaceTiming a couple friends and realized we'd start to open it up and be fun to spend all this time together. And instead of being stuck in our houses alone, and we could hang out and talk and laugh and enjoy time together. So kind of birthed out of that, which is awesome. So I added it in the group again, but if you're not on the Slack channel and you like to join, the link is in the chat there. Just to talk and hang out and whatnot. Also, I have the list of portfolio reviews and sending those out after this today. So if you're on the list or would like to get on it, shoot me a message here or on Slack or Instagram, wherever. I have about 20 people so far. So if you're a pro and would like to look at portfolios, let me know and I can send you some students or people that would like to have their portfolio looked at. And then if you're a student or up and coming, or you just update your website and you'd like to have someone look at it, send me a message and I would be happy to connect you all. So last week we started presentations for the first time. If you missed Friday, we recorded it and put it on YouTube, which was awesome. Thanks again to Brandon and Craig. So that was awesome. If you'd like to hop over there and do that, you can find that on my YouTube. And I'll put the link in here, and it's also on the Slack. Today, we have the always ever Miss Maddie Meyer from Getty. Really excited to have her share some stuff. She graduated from OU a few years ago and interned at the Seattle Times, the Washington Post.
Oh, no, I heard
Getty Images, and now works full-time for Getty Sport. And really excited to have her share her stuff. And so without further ado, I will pass it over to her. Don't forget, change your name to your Instagram handle if you'd like, or you can drop them in the chat below so we can all follow each other and whatnot. And other than that, feel free to drop questions in the chat and ask verbally. Whenever you stop Maddie, hop on and say something. Feel free. And if you're not like talking or whatnot, if you can mute your mic while she presents, and then unmute it if you got questions or whatnot, just so we can keep the volume focused on her. So y'all the best. And without further ado, I'll hop it over to Maddie and pin her video and share. Where do you want me to start, Maddie? On the recent stuff or the website?
Sure. Recent stuff is fine.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. And thank you, Michael, for organizing this. I know it's a really weird time for all of us and a lot of adjustments and working in sport, not a lot of traditional work stuff going on. So thanks for having me. You know, it's a really small community, so it's great to keep in touch and be talking together this way. And as you guys, I'm sure, saw, like I mentioned, it's a tiny community, and we lost a member this week with Anthony Causey, which I'm sure many of you have met him or know him. So I know personally I'm happy to kind of be with a group of other photographers today to talk about work and, you know, have something positive. Also in the spirit of improvising, my computer was flooded with coffee. So thank you, Michael, for pulling through some work in my website. But as he mentioned too, I'd love to answer a ton of questions. It can be about whatever you guys want. I know there's a lot of students and recent grads on here. So Michael asked if I'd talk a little bit about how I got to where I am and some internships, but if you have specific questions, please, whatever you guys want to talk about, I'm happy to go there. So I don't think I can see the chat, but Michael, do you mind reading stuff if they pop up?
Yeah. And feel free to ask out loud, everyone.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, whatever. So I guess a little background on me. I grew up outside of DC in Northern Virginia and always loved playing sports and was introduced to photography by most stars aligning thing ever. I played soccer with Doug Mills' daughter. He's a New York Times photographer, and he would take pictures of our soccer games, and I just thought it was so cool. And he would tell me about covering the Super Bowl and the Olympics and the White House, and I just thought, you know, like a lot of kids say they want to be an astronaut, I thought I want to be a sports photographer. You know, that's the coolest job I've ever heard of. So I really kind of ran with it as much as I could. I'm sure a lot of you guys took pictures for your school paper. I did that in high school and college as well. And then I worked for the athletics department at OU too, which was the first time really being able to shoot sports every day and be embedded with a team a little bit, get access to the locker room, I couldn't get enough of it. I had that feeling that I'm sure all of you guys do too, where I felt like I was in the right place, and it was just, I got such energy from that type of coverage. So while I was in school, I had internships like Michael mentioned. I worked at the Washington Post and the Seattle Times, and interned at Getty Sport in New York City, where I got the chance to meet Al Bello and Elsa Garrison, a lot of these big giants in the industry. And I got along with them, and I thought, again, these are the type of people I want to be around. This is the type of work I want to do, and tried to just be like a sponge and soak everything in that I could from them. So once I wrapped up school, I was really kind of on my boss's case, and I was like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. And luckily there was a job open in Boston. So about 2 weeks after I graduated, I drove up to Boston and have been here ever since. So another thing I kind of wanted to touch on just a little bit is, I know you guys have had some really talented team photographers talk. Brandon's awesome, and Cooper and Craig doing schools and teams and freelance. And like mentioned, I work for Getty, which is a wire service. So my being on staff means not having the flexibility of freelance, kind of dictating your own schedule, but that's kind of something that I really like. And I think I recommend for students trying to kind of figure out what your temperament lends itself to best. I really like having one set of coworkers and kind of having a relationship with editors where we talk about kind of what are my goals for the year, what are the assignments I'd like to do, and also getting the chance to work with really talented coworkers who I get to learn a lot from, which is great. So as of right now, things are kind of frozen, as I'm sure they are for most of you guys too, but I'm hoping, once things get back going, most of what I cover is Patriots, Bruins, Celtics, and the Red Sox, as well as some travel too. So that's kind of like the gist of it, the basis. Michael, do you have any suggestions or questions?
Not off the bat. Let's see if there's any in the chat.
Let's see, Liz.
What's it? Yeah, Liz. There we go. You got a couple there.
Oh, perfect. What's some advice for getting your first job out of school? Oh, awesome. So I think that it really also kind of depends on what type of college experience you've had. If you're somebody who really wants to work kind of in big markets and you have the context to go into freelancing right away, that's something you can do. But I think that if you can swing having another internship, or certainly at least one internship, that's a great step. For a few reasons. I think it's great to be shooting as much as possible and get a strong portfolio. But even if that's something that you've made while you're in school, making contacts is really helpful. The way I became an intern at Getty Sport was actually through having done political work in DC. I worked for a really tiny newspaper on Capitol Hill called The Hill. And I was a freshman in college and made like very bad Capitol Hill photos. And, by the time I was a senior, I was kind of looking for other internships to do stuff that was more sports based. And the news photographers for Getty out of DC were able to vouch for me. And they said, hey, we haven't seen her shoot sports, but we've seen her work hard on assignment in DC. She shows up early, she's respectful, she works hard. And it was just funny because something that seems really unrelated actually really helped me out, because I didn't know any Getty Sport photographers, but the news guys were able to really vouch for me there, which is super valuable. So long-winded way of saying, I think look for a place where you're going to be able to improve as a photographer. Look for a place where you can work with people who inspire you to be better or learn from, whether it's at the organization that you're looking for a job or the market. I'm the only Getty photographer in Boston, but every day I work next to photographers I look up to at the Boston Globe and the Herald and AP. So I think that as a sport photographer is really important too, to kind of look at who you're working around as well.
Great question.
Yeah. Hey, Maddie.
Yes.
When Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Preston?
Good, good, good. When you start your internship at Getty,
Yes.
so how did like Al and Elsa challenge you
Oh
when
my
you went
gosh,
out
so much.
trying to make photographs?
So much. So I think what was really great about that internship was getting the chance to shadow both of them a little bit. You start your internship at the US Open tennis, and I'd never shot tennis before. So I was terrified following around Al Bello at the US Open. I was just like, this guy's going to see straight through me that I don't know what I'm doing. But what I really admired about him and Elsa is they'll teach. And then before I felt ready, they would just kind of throw you out there and be like, you know what you're doing, figure it out, And so that was really helpful. And I think what's cool about, like I said, with internships or looking at jobs is you can pull a little bit from each person, like even if I wanted to, there's no way I can be just like Al Bello, but I think about him all the time now, the stuff that he told me when I was an intern on day one of really finding clean backgrounds, really looking for good light. And some of the strategies he gave me, I keep, and some of the things Elsa told me, which a lot of times are really logistical, of when you're showing up, who you're sitting next to, how to get people to move over just a little bit, are things I pull from her too. So they're both phenomenal teachers. And, I feel so lucky to have met them then and work with them now is great. Let's see. Michael, you don't have questions for me?
I mean, I can throw some. During your internship and, even more beyond, a lot, in the past speakers we've had has, a lot of them done documentary stuff and some of the other stuff. Can you talk about how newspaper experience went into cover an event and, Brent mentioned the US Open and covering it as a full event, because that's a lot of what we do at Getty. And, we're going through your Olympic stuff now and the soccer stuff, and how you cover an event over a period of time and number of days, and how you're looking for, the daily requirements, but also for a full story.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that what I think about is, first of all, being at Getty, our clients' needs in my mind are the most important, and what I cover, first of all, just to get all the bases covered. For example, at the US Open, we need photos that are clean, peak action of Serena Williams, no questions asked. That's what we absolutely need. But my kind of mindset is I always think about my mom, because she and I are really close. And she's somebody who's really very supportive of me, but not a huge sports fan. And so she's kind of my trick when I'm looking at a big event. Sometimes that can feel overwhelming. I'm at events sometimes that are over a month long. And I think if I were to, maybe I'm in Russia and I can't call my mom right now, but what would I tell her about what I experienced today? What would I tell her was the interesting part or different part or even boring part? That's okay. Sometimes that's part of the story too. So that's kind of what I think about is I try and every day, bases covered of action, peak emotion, whether it's happiness or sadness, what does the venue look like? And what does it feel like? Ultimately, I think that's what makes pictures go from good to great is really, I want people to feel like they're there. And then by the end of an event, if I've done a good job, hopefully I'll have a good, pretty big batch with a big variety of details and wide images and emotions and stuff in good light. And then I can kind of sit down and pull it together. But I mean, something that is just in the nature of working at a wire is I'm not working with an editor who's laying pictures out. I kind of make these pictures, then throw them to the wind and hope they land somewhere pretty, So I think things like my Instagram and stuff that I do on my end to kind of keep myself accountable and keep improving are important too.
Of course. Do you have any questions in the chat? Let's
see. I can see it now.
Okay, one from Will here. Can you shed any light on the process of pushing images mid-game or after games to social, to clients, between image selection tools, software, specifically smaller teams and programs?
Okay. So it sounds like advice if you're working, if your client is the smaller team or if you're working for a school, I'm guessing. Yeah. Will, if you have more to clarify, I'll. jump in. So what I would think about too is sometimes a trap I fall into is assuming that the client wants me to cover something like it is the Super Bowl, meaning they want a ton of pictures all the time, when sometimes their expectations are not that. So I think the first thing that's super important is to sit down with whoever your client is, whether it's, you know, the social media team, an athletics director, a newspaper, and say, you know, make sure you guys are on the same page. Because sometimes they might say, we want 5 pictures after the game, or maybe they do say, we need 5 pictures pregame, after each quarter, whatever it might be. So I think that's something that might be something you might already know, or something that for people who are kind of getting started is super important. And then I think it is a challenge really needing to nail down internet service. I think great people to talk to about this maybe in further chats are people who work for teams. But the way I kind of do it is using either just a hotspot on my phone or making sure I can get near an Ethernet line in order to send smaller resolution photos just so they can get something quick. So of course, that's the name of our game, you know, getting these pictures to clients right away. So the way I think about it is just personally for the work that I'm doing is I think I want people to have something right away, you know, just as a placeholder, whether it be for ESPN or a team for Instagram. So like after the first quarter or first period or in the first, like the first big kind of play that happens, I try and send that. And then I think that by the time the game is over, people already need a lot of stuff to put up, right? You know, they don't have time to wait an extra half hour after the game. So that's what I try and think. And then of course, just getting the best stuff out quickly. I tag really heavily in my camera, and I use Focus, which is the Getty Images software, but you can do the same thing in Photo Mechanic where I just view tagged and right away cruise through those. And then the stuff that I haven't tagged is generally stock stuff that I, you know, can go back through later. Yeah. Again, if more questions to that, let me know.
There's so from Sarah. Hey, Maddie, I remember a while back you covered a hot air balloon festival convention for Getty. Someone, maybe Al or Elsa, mentioned that you pitched that or got a grant for it. As a staffer, how often are you pitching events and stories?
Yeah, honestly, not as often as I thought I would. And I think it also, let's see. I mean, this in only the best way possible. Being in Boston means I'm really busy with how good the teams have been lately, which again is awesome. No complaints. You know, we'll see what happens this year without Tom Brady, but it's the kind of thing where I block off January of like, this is probably going to be go time. But sometimes we'll get approached by companies that will want a Getty photographer to do something with their cameras or their equipment. So what Sarah's talking about here is I did a project partnering with Lumix where they said, you know, pitch to us something sport related where you will go shoot with our cameras and we can use them in ads. And so I was like, let me think. I was like, I'm probably going to be in a situation where I don't know how to use this camera that well and I want it to be really pretty. So I was thinking of like, what would be a like desktop background level pretty? And so I went to the Hot Air Balloon Festival in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was beautiful. And, you know, our jobs are cool. You know, if you can work it so you can get like, enjoy it and have a little bit of a vacation out of it, I am queen of that. And so that's how that kind of happened, is pitching it that way. And being able to deliver to the client something that I knew that they would just think, this is a pretty beautiful photo. But I also pitch some stuff locally. For example, I cover the Head of the Charles Regatta every year. It's my favorite event, hands down. And it's a big, you know, crew regatta on the Charles River in Boston. And, you know, I just know I have to be a little flexible there. I mark it on my calendar every year and I say, you know, obviously the Red Sox will take precedent, but if I can take these few days and just go out and walk and make pictures in pretty light and not hear no from a PR person for a few days, that does wonders for my creativity and mental health. So if something catches my eye, people are pretty flexible, but obviously for the most part, my priorities are the cool stuff in the region.
Yeah, another question here that somebody asked. Can you, specifically, you started in Boston at how old? It was 23, 24?
22.
22, even better. So being a young photographer in such a market of some older
Molly.
people, older audience, that you're working side by side, garnering the respect, and you talk about things that you did as Maddie, because I know so many people speak highly of it, and I've seen it personally for myself of you and how you command that respect, not in a egregious way, but in that we're working in a professional environment, and it's difficult as a lot of young photographers coming into situations like that, and I think that would go to speak to and help some people here. So
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, like, talking about just being a photographer in this space. A lot of people ask me about my gender coming into play with this job, and I think it does, to be honest. But I think what really I bump up against day to day, as I'm sure many people on this call do, is age. I work with people who have been working in Boston for 30 years, which is amazing, but they're never asked for the fourth time to see ID, or what are you doing here, or are you working for a school yearbook kind of thing. But I think the best thing to do is, I just really try and focus on myself, and focus on the task at hand. And I do some little things. Again, everybody's different. This is what I do. Doesn't mean it's right for every situation or every person. When I'm working in really crowded areas, will just wear earplugs or headphones, because it really kind of keeps me focused and level on what I'm working with here. And then, I love the journalism community. I love being a part of it. And so I really made an effort when I got to Boston to really try and connect with the people I knew I was going to be working with every day. I love my Getty coworkers, but I don't see them that much. I really see the guys who work in Boston a lot more. So they didn't really talk to me much for a while when I first got here, but really sitting down and having, shitty media food every night and saying, but how are your kids? How is that college application process going? And it's not BS, because I do care, and I do want to be their friend. So I think just being genuine, being hardworking, honest, I try and, like I kind of said when Preston asked, like, I take things I admire about other people and try and embody them myself. Like, I see how hardworking, caring, and honest, Al are and Elsa are, and just try and move that forward. And I think ultimately, people are going to see if you are being the best version of yourself. They're going to realize, all right, this is a person who's serious, who's here to work, and, got to respect that, because everybody started somewhere, Yeah,
of course. Logan asked, after covering your 50th straight Red Sox game in mid-September, how do you challenge yourself to come up with something different, set yourself apart from stuff, and what are you doing, or even covering an event over a week, or how to get something different and push yourself and challenge yourself differently?
Yeah, it's really challenging, to be honest. And I think, I kind of mentioned a little bit, one of my first internships was on Capitol Hill, and I think covering politics and covering sport are really similar, because you're often covering the exact same thing in the exact same place for the 500th time. But what I try and do is a few things. Like, I kind of have a checklist in my brain if I feel myself checking out a little bit, of if I rock up to work and I'm kind of dragging ass, I'm like, that's not right. You have a kick-ass job. You should be excited to be here. Here's what we're going to think about today. I think, is there a different perspective I can show? Can I do a different angle? Can I challenge myself and use a different lens? Something I started doing this year is just shooting, games that are not like, I'm not talking about like the Super Bowl or NBA playoffs. I'm talking about mid-season stuff. Can I shoot with just an 85 and a 35 on the closer end of the court? Can I try a remote that I haven't done? Can I look for a certain detail kind of thing? So I'll kind of set up little like challenges for myself that way. And like I said, with Instagram, sometimes I try and give myself an assignment there too. Like, I did cover a lot of youth soccer tournaments, which I love doing. And I made just kind of a challenge for myself for the first month, or the first 2 weeks, like, I'm going to look for details about religion, because that's what struck me about a lot of these teenagers from these South American countries, is they're all really, not all, many are very religious. So I was looking for tattoos and gestures and, you know, prayers and things like that. Even just keep in the back of my mind. So I'm really kind of on my toes the whole time. So that's what I think about. You definitely, as I'm sure all of you guys know, you've got to kind of have a few things up your sleeve because it can get really monotonous if you're not careful.
Another question James just asked. Can you talk about covering a Super Bowl, like from start to finish? Like, when do you figure out where you're going to be? How you start to think about that? How you maneuver that? The cabling and you know, talk about the system of the editing and some of that stuff. So.
Yeah, absolutely. It is such a behemoth of an event, and we have. Let me see. I want to get the numbers right for you guys. I think we have 5.
Yeah.
I think we have 11 photographers working. Michael, you might be able to correct me. Sport photographers. I think we have 11, and we also have entertainment photographers there as well. So our director of photography does the assigning of those positions, and we kind of break it up by quadrant on the field, and then we have one person roaming who generally it's either their like home team or their stadium, or somebody who's had a really good season covering football will generally roam. And then we have people sitting in the front row of the stands in the corners of each end zone. So that's another 4 people. And then we have somebody all the way at the very top elevated and somebody kind of on the mid-layer tier of the stadium. And the idea there is, you know, we want the best coverage we can, and then we've got backup, you know, behind you or in front of you as well. So our technicians, our technology team, who, like, you know, God bless them, I could be nowhere without them. They come in a week before and wire the whole thing so that each corner in the stands and on the field have their own Ethernet port that they can plug into, and we send every picture through there. And then we have a trailer of editors who, again, sorry, I don't want to get the numbers wrong. It's at least 6 people.
Yep.
And I've edited a few times too, which is such a good learning experience, who are going through and tapping and captioning and toning and sending those photos out. So it's a huge team effort, and that's one of the other things I love about Getty is working on those huge events as a group together, because you just see a bunch of kind of like goofy people really dial in and focus and get that shit done. But to be totally honest, I freak out every time. Like, my stomach hurts for like 2 days leading up to the Super Bowl. I get so nervous because, you know, if like Logan asked, if it's a mid-season Red Sox game, generally, if I miss something, nobody's gonna notice. But if you miss a touchdown right in front of you, that is what nightmares are made of in the Super Bowl. So, but it is really cool. Like, as mentioned, I feel lucky to have coworkers who I am honest with them. I'm like, I'm really nervous. And they're like, hey, we got backup. You've got this. It's just a game. You know, work hard. We'll make it work. But there's so many people on the sidelines. You're not really able to move too much. You just have to be paying attention to the game, do your research. And honestly, I just think, like, do the best you can with what you're given there.
Another question. This person said, thanks for doing this. I'm a high school student and starting to look at colleges. My question would be, what did you major in and what did you look for in a college, or any suggestions you would give to high school students that have a big interest in sports?
Oh, totally. Yeah, where Logan said. So I think there's no one right answer to this. I know people who studied environmental science and worked at their college newspaper and are super successful photographers. What I did is, like I mentioned, I'm very lucky that I knew this is what I wanted to do when I was really young. So by the time I was looking at colleges, I knew, like, this is all I want to do. So I looked at Western Kentucky University, the University of Missouri, or Mizzou, University of Missouri, and Ohio University. And just to be honest, I didn't feel like I could handle being in Missouri so far from home. So OU was a 5-hour drive from DC, and it was a really beautiful campus. And I talked to 2 of the professors there who I felt like were able to prep me to be the best I could be. They looked at our portfolios and they were like, all right, you got a lot to learn. And I was kind of like, all right, like, well, tough love already. This is cool. So I went to Ohio University. I studied photojournalism there. And what I looked for in it was professors I thought were really, like I mentioned, would push me, would challenge me, and I wanted to be shooting right away. There are some programs where you don't start doing really photo-focused classes until you're a junior, and I wanted to be doing it on day one. And I was really struck by, I did a campus tour and I walked through the photo department and I had upperclassmen stopping to say hi, giving me their cards. It just felt like a really cool environment that I wanted to be a part of. So that's the way I did it. But again, you know, I have friends who have kind of landed there a bunch of different ways. So, you know, more than one way to do it.
Yeah. One of the questions here, let's see. How do you, specifically talking about, I mean, I guess you weren't freelance for too long. I know you had a semester there in school you were, but, you know, as a student, a college student, you got Washington Post, Seattle Times, and Getty. How did you put together a portfolio when you have a variety of sports you've covered? What type of platform did you use, and how did you pitch yourself to editors to job app internships? I'm sure you applied to, you know, 80 a year, and you only
Yes.
you got 3 total, and I think that's kind of the idea. But how did you go about that? I know you did Eddie Adams as well. What some other outlets and workshops and whatnot did you go through that really helped you build connections and learn from others?
For sure. Well, first of all, I just want to say, like you mentioned, I'm not too far out of school, but I do think things have changed a lot. You know, it's kind of the name of the game here. So this is kind of what I've seen and what I did. But shout out to, I think the biggest change since I was in school is teams having really good internships. And I think that's an awesome option for people who are looking to do something sport related. I didn't see a lot of people doing that when I'm in school, but I know, just for example, the Red Sox have an amazing internship program. I've worked alongside a lot of their interns, like Sarah, who asked a question, and then she went on to Getty. Like, definitely look into that for sure. I put together, we used to have to burn CDs. Doesn't it sound like I'm from like
Yep.
decades ago? We would burn CDs and ship them in envelopes, and I would send so many out and get so many rejections. But now I think something that's great is to try and make a connection before the intern application. And people would tell me this and I thought it was BS, but I think people do really like seeing growth over time. So even if you're somebody who's a sophomore and you feel like you're not ready for something big, I think it makes sense to still apply, because then people can see how you grow over time. I went to a lot of workshops. I went to the Atlanta Photojournalism Seminar, which is awesome, the Northern Short Course. I did the mountain workshops in Kentucky, which I really liked. Eddie Adams, as you mentioned. The connection that helped me, one of them that helped me the most was, I was at the Atlanta Photojournalism Seminar and I met Jonathan Newton, who's a photographer for the Washington Post. And he was somebody whose, you know, work I looked at every day in the Washington Post. And that was like my goal, was to, you know, work there. And I met him and I was so scared, and I was a sophomore, and he was so great because he was so honest with me. He said, look, you know, you're off to a good start. You're not good enough to come to the Post right now, but keep in touch with me. You know, show me your work. Next time you're home in DC, I'll show you the office. And I remember being kind of scared, but I did follow up with him. And honestly, like, I applied for the internship and didn't get it, like he said. But that next year I applied and I did get it. And I am really thankful that he was somebody I kept in touch with and asked for advice. And that just came from, you know, one of those portfolio reviews after a workshop talk. So yeah, I think that definitely keep in touch with people. There's plenty of people who I've met and sat down with and been like, keep in touch. And I never hear from them again, and I'm so sad. So definitely do that when people tell you to. Of
course. All right. So do you feel like a shot list for games limits creativity and freedom, or keeps you more organized and focused?
I think everybody's different. I like shot lists personally. Whether it is a shot list of, you know, make sure you get these rookies, or if I'm going into a big assignment like a World Cup or March Madness, I'll write a list for myself. because I've had the situation, I don't know about you guys, where I'm working really hard, I think I'm making good pictures, and then an event ends, and I try and pull it all together, and I'm like, you don't have one good detail. You know, you don't have one good tight action shot. You only, you know, like, so for me, I like having a list just to kind of keep running in the background of my mind and kind of referencing. And I think I try my best to be on top of all the sports news. But it's a lot. You know, I am not somebody with an encyclopedic knowledge of receivers and, you know, stats. And so I appreciate it when I get a little help that way.
Of course. Let's see. Yes. Was there, this is from Hannah, was there a training period when starting with Getty in terms of post-processing and providing them the images? So maybe talk about your internship in New York and maybe what that looks like and what that, because I know that's application, I don't know if that's still out or whatnot, but for people interested in sports, that's a great opportunity. And maybe talk about, you know, what that internship looks like start to finish and whatnot.
For sure. Yeah, that was basically my training period that led into the job. And I think something that's really different about Getty versus even some of the newspapers I worked on, which of course were on deadline, is it's really instant for Getty being a wire. And so, you know, at the US Open, which was my first assignment, I spent a day or two in the editing room with the editors, watching them kind of go through how they caption, what their format is, how they like pictures cropped, kind of thing. And then pretty quickly, I was tossed straight into doing things myself. You know, I was able to kind of shadow the first time at Yankee Stadium type of thing. And then it was, you're fine. You know, call us if you need help. I always felt like I had support, but I really think my experience at the athletics department at OU was really helpful with that. Being used to working with a large volume of images. So I think that's good to kind of take note of. You don't need to be at a Red Sox game. I think really good training is being at a football game at a university for sure. So yeah, it was nice. I felt like there was a lot of trust in me as an intern, and I'm sure some of you guys on this call can speak to that too. If you fuck up, we will help you, or I'm sorry, but if you screw up, we will help you. But once you've shown that you can handle it, they're gonna put faith in you there. So then by the time I started in Boston, it really was just kind of like, here you go, which is good. Like I think that's the only way to fly, is really kind of get nudged out of the nest a little bit.
Great. Any more questions? Feel free to ask. If you haven't asked one yet, we'd love to hear from you. Maddie's here. And
I don't think I answered all of these. What is this?
you can peek I was trying to filter as much as I could and answer them all.
I'll let you be the judge.
Good. Oh, where's Meg's question? Sorry. Oh, from Meg. Do you shoot anything yourself? Anything outside of Getty? How do you balance time for that and the creativity needed?
So everybody's different, obviously. I think for me, I think it's easy to feel really burned out of photography sometimes, just because of the amount of work. You know, right now, obviously, I miss it, but so often when I'm not working, I don't have my camera with me and don't shoot a ton. I take pictures on my phone a lot, obviously, but I think as far as I have like a little Fuji camera that I'll bring with me on vacation sometimes, and as mentioned, do stuff with my phone. But you know, I'll draw a little bit. I like going to art museums, but I think sometimes I really need a break from it. And I do think, you know, often I find myself kind of taking notes about stuff in my head. Like for example, like I mentioned, I do the head of the Charles, that regatta every year, and running for me is the best way to decompress and kind of take me time, because you know, we work in such really loud, crowded spaces that for me to recharge, I need to really disconnect from that. So it's actually, you know, this quarantine time, it's been kind of nice. I've been running a lot and really thinking a lot about light and pattern, and you know, that's not a gallery on my website. It's not like a deliverable, but you know, I still feel like I'm using those skills and kind of paying attention in my off time. But you know, when I'm not working, sometimes my camera's just sit in a closet and they need to just cool off for a minute.
Yeah. One of the questions just now said, can we talk about portfolios and how to set them up? Can you speak to what you look for, you know, for a lot of people in here, whether they're, you know, early pros or just graduating college here soon, for the students that are in school now, but what images, you know, really capture an editor's eye, and what are some of, what aspects of students' portfolios have you seen that really stand out, and, you know, what should they, you know, kind of, you know, move past, because, you know, we can kind of get connected to pictures or whatnot, and what elements make a good portfolio?
Yeah, so I think that, at least personally, when I'm looking at students' work, I want to make sure they have kind of the easier basic stuff, in my opinion, kind of ironed out. And to me, what that means is straightened horizons, you know, good crops where you're not cutting off fingers or toes or knees, you know, the kind of stuff that you can get worked out, you know, by looking at friends' work or teachers or whatever. And then recognizing kind of bigger theme type of stuff. Are you capturing that peak moment? And peak moment doesn't have to just be a slam dunk. That can mean peak emotion, you know, excitement, despair. Are you recognizing good light? And if you're stuck with something with not great light, are you working with it the best way you can? Because I think, to me, that's the ease. Like, if I'm looking through and somebody's backgrounds are a mess, I'm like, we need more practice here. But to me, what takes a portfolio to like the next level is really strong compositions, you know, really strong lines, stuff where you're really drawn to a picture and you kind of sit with it for a minute. And somebody who might have a good, you know, personal style, which I think takes a long time to develop. I'm getting there myself, but those are the kind of things I look at. But I think if you're just kind of getting started and thinking, what do I look at here? Sometimes what I do, this is kind of weird, but I'll take my glasses off and I'll look at my work and think, like, is there anything that jumps out as just like not good? You know, is this crop weird? Is this light not good? You've got to really try hard to like untangle. All of us have that picture, right? Where you're like, oh my gosh, it was 40 degrees and raining for 7 hours. This picture means so much to me, but if you show that to somebody else, they don't know that and they don't care, you know? So finding whatever works for you to give yourself that space to really look at it with the most unbiased way you can, because you're only as good as the worst picture in your portfolio. And I think it depends on where you're applying. If you're applying to a team, by all means, send in mostly sports stuff. But if you're looking at a newspaper, it is good to show that you can do kind of well-rounded stuff. And even applying to a team, a lot of what that is now is kind of doing some of their events, their PR stuff, their pregame stuff. So just showing you can shoot a clean, good, solid photo of a moment is really important.
Sweet. Had one of these fun questions about this. Do you have a favorite memory, or what is your best experience? Do you get the chance to show athletes your work, and then favorite sport or athlete to photograph?
Sure. So I really enjoy sports, but I'm not necessarily the biggest sports fan. Like on my days off, I'm not somebody who's just watching an NBA game for the most part. But I did grow up playing soccer and I loved it. And so covering the Women's World Cup is the coolest thing. And so this year, I was working on contract for FIFA because we have a partnership with them. So I covered the Women's World Cup final and the US won. And one person gets to go in the locker room. And I was working with a bunch of my European colleagues and they were like, all right, it's your team, you can go. So I went in and oh my gosh, like I was a little bit starstruck. And at one point, Alex Morgan was shaking champagne and accidentally exploded all over me. And she was like, I'm so sorry. And I you know, you've got to keep it together and not lose it. But I was just like, it's fine. No place I'd rather be. So yeah, some of these, that was like, they're all really drunk because they had to wait for Megan Rapinoe because she was drug tested. So they were drinking for like a solid 45 minutes on empty stomachs before we took a few less photos and they kicked me out. So anyway, that's a tangent, but I love that. Do you get the chance to show athletes your work? My relationship with athletes is really different than the team photographers. For example, my friend Billy Weiss, who I'm sure you guys have heard of, the Red Sox photographer, he has personal relationships with those athletes and will often photograph, weddings or baby photos, and really gets to kind of work and collaborate with them. For me, it's really separate, particularly American athletes, like they're celebrities, it's different than some of my coworkers who work in Australia, which is kind of, a bit of a smaller market. So I generally am not talking to the athletes much. Every so often I'll get like a DM asking for a photo or something like that, but it's not, we're not friends. I wouldn't say, just because I'm not close with them. And I think there's a last part to that question, but I don't remember it. I'm sorry. I think it went away on my chat.
Here's one. I shoot primarily football and baseball, and a lot of the same thing, different day. What is your best advice to get creative while shooting the same content?
Totally. Yeah. I touched on it a little bit, but I think, my first step is, can I find a different angle? Can I get lower? Can I get higher? Then I think about, can I use a different lens? Can I use a prime lens? Can I, if you're in college and you're lucky enough to be at a place that has a locker of gear, you can check out, what does it look like if I shoot, with a 135 or a 2-400 or that old 500 kicking around in the back of the cage that nobody touches, trying to mix it up with gear a little bit. And then also really looking for moments. Like, one of my favorite photographers is one of my coworkers, Patrick Smith, who's super talented. And he's got a ton of stuff on his website, which I think normally is overkill, but with him, I can look at it for days. And I'll think, some of his most successful pictures to me are really tight face pictures. And that's my little challenge if I'm feeling burned out, is like, I want to make a tight picture of someone's face. And I'm going to sit with this 400 with people on the 10-yard line or 5-yard line and just see what I can do there. Or he has a really nice photo of a bead of sweat coming off somebody's eyelashes at basketball. And I think, all right, I'm bored at NBA. This isn't right. Let me turn and use my 300 on the bench next to me and try and mix it up that way. So those are just kind of base level stuff. But sometimes I'll try and illustrate more intangible stuff of what players have a history together, who's friends, and try and look at that connection, kind of the quieter moments too. So got to come up with a lot of ideas to keep yourself busy there.
All right, time for one or two more. Anybody else? No problem. What's your response to athletes asking for pictures?
I normally run that by my bosses. I feel like that's something that's kind of over my head. A lot of times they're okay with athletes getting pictures just for their Instagram. We obviously, what we want to avoid is somebody taking photos and using them for big marketing stuff where we'd be missing out on revenue that way. But for example, I had pictures of Zach Ertz, making out with his wife who's on the women's soccer team, and I ran it up the food chain. They're like, oh my God, yeah, fine, just give it to him. So I think the rules for social media are kind of different than obviously sending large files just kind of indiscriminately to people. But again, yeah, that's something that I run up over my head.
Yeah. Any closing comments, Maddie? I got one more, I guess. Let's see if it's a question. What's your favorite or most fun sport to shoot? Or here's another one that you can. What's your favorite, most fun? What is one thing you would love to shoot that you haven't yet?
Oh, okay. So my favorite sport's probably soccer, just because I feel like I understand it the best. Sometimes there's moments in football, for example, which I watch and shoot all the time now, but I'm not from a family that grew up watching football every Sunday. There's some stuff where I'm like, oh, they faked me out too, which is not great. But for soccer, I know it and I get it and I love that. But the thing I shoot less frequently that I enjoy is figure skating, just because I think, man, that is so hard to do, and also the type of person who's a figure skater. Oh yeah, look at these pictures here. You need to be so fit and so confident. And it's also theater a little bit too. There's just so many components there, and with team sports, you know, you're kind of all in it together, and but with the sports where it's really just one person, I'm fascinated by that. And so I enjoy those too. A sport I haven't done but would like to.
Or event, yeah.
Or event. Um, I've never done a men's World Cup final, which I'd love to do because that's, you know, the hot, like just all eyes are there. And let's see. I've also haven't done a lot of track. I've done some track, but I've never done like really high level track and field. And so to me, the 100-meter dash is kind of terrifying to photograph because there's such a small margin of error there. You really need to be on your game, but that's something I would love to be a part of that coverage one day.
That's great. Well, I just want to thank you for taking the time to talk. That was awesome, and I think it was very valuable. And if you all have any other questions, Maddie, I'm sure we'd love to answer them, whether that's in over email on our site or even over Instagram DM or whatnot. She's always been a great resource for me, and I'm very thankful for her coming on here and sharing some stuff. So thanks to her. You can drop some comments for her in the chat.
Yeah.
So thanks again, Maddie. We really appreciate it.
Of course. I was just going to add, I've got more time now than I have in a long time. So I love looking at students' work or, you know, older pros, whoever. I really am happy to talk to people and look at work. I love it. So please don't hesitate to reach out. And whenever our Getty internship gets rolling, I know the fall one is really up in the air just due to what's going on in the world, but it's an amazing opportunity. The application is open. We have one in Los Angeles and one in New York. So definitely look into that too. But thank you guys so much. I hope I was helpful to some people.
Before we wrap up, I would be remiss to say, Maddie mentioned it about the passing of Anthony. I was going to take some time if you all want. I was going to flip through some of his pictures. And one reason I started this is just to have a fun community. And I know a lot of us knew him really well, and some of us didn't. But I think that being the small photo world we are, it hits us pretty hard just seeing because we all know what that looks like to be, you know, so connected to a photographer we love and care for. So I was going to flip through, put up his 40 best pictures ever. And I was just going to scroll through those and we'll look at them. And then if anybody has a brief story or a funny story of him, open up the floor. Cause I know right now, you know, normally if we were working games, we see each other and be able to laugh and tell stories. But it really, like the fact that we're social distancing doesn't mean we have to like, you know, be isolate and hide from each other. So I'd love to open it up the floor to people share stories or whatnot and kind of honor him through time. So we won't go long, but I'll flip through these pictures and then would love to have anyone share stories or a joke from him. So let me flip to this. Well, that is it. Thanks for hanging and looking those. But yeah, just go open the floor if anybody wants to share any stories or I guess I'll start. The last time I saw him was at Super Bowl, and I know he spent like an hour and a half he forgot a monopod to like the biggest game of the year, which is classic him, and spent some time asking everybody if they had a monopod, and eventually found that. But I just love that story, and I just know he was a champion for young photographers and was always encouraging, especially, Maddie and Sarah and whatnot with the Getty interns and many others, and just always encouraged. And he was a great photographer, but by far a better person, and just so awesome. So if anybody has a story they'd like to share, I'll open it up. But other than that, I'll end it once it goes quiet for a second. But if anybody wants to share anything, go for it.
Yeah, I met him a bunch of times when I worked at UFC. He was always great, always encouraging. Gave me a lot of confidence in the stuff I did, especially when I was starting off. I didn't think much of it, but he was always great and encouraged me. And then the last time I actually saw him was my last UFC event in New York. And I remember I told him I was leaving, and I was pretty scared and worried about leaving the sport I had covered for 4 years. And he was, super supportive, told me not to sweat it, that I wouldn't be missing much and that I'd be going on to do some great things. So, sad to hear the story, and he was always so great and encouraging.
Yeah, I agree. That was my experience too. When I was an intern in New York, I didn't have a ton of confidence in myself. I was just trying to take it one day at a time. And I remember my last, week as an intern, he was like, you came in here a kid and you're leaving a photographer, you're going to kick ass. Just like a total pump up talk that I didn't have in myself, but I still think about now, and I really kind of needed then. And I'm also really struck by how much love he had for his family. I think anybody who spent time with him, he talked so much about his wife and his kids, and he loved them so much. And I'm thinking of them, and I feel for them, and I'm thankful that he was able to give them so much love while he was here too.
I met Anthony once at a Brooklyn Cyclones game when one of the Mets players were rehabbing, and we only got to talk for a couple of hours, but I was super familiar with him, and I was a huge fan of his, so it was kind of funny to think about now that I got the chance to talk to him. And I remember he was giving me so much advice since I was young and still kind of starting out. And out of everything he said, the one thing I remember was, don't do the same shit as everyone else. And I just think the way he said it was just so funny. And we laughed about that for a while. And even now, we talked for hours in the dugout, and that's the one thing I can vividly remember. So I'm really glad I got to have that experience with him.
I think something that he was like really well known for was all these really great relationships that he had with like everybody, whether they were just like regular fans, photographers, or the athletes themselves. Like everybody kind of remembers that about him. And I feel like something that he like really taught me that especially matters now in my freelance career is he was always like thinking about how do you keep and maintain relationships with people. So he was always like hounding me, like, did you write a handwritten thank you note to this person? Or like if I was going over to someone's house for dinner, he'd be like, what kind of bottle of wine are you bringing them? And like all this like kind of not like old school stuff, but stuff I think people don't realize is still important. And obviously like that was the legacy he really left.
Yeah.
U.S. Open story for me. One of the first years I was working there, I'd heard of Anthony, and I, slipped into the pit and was shooting some. I was actually working as an editor for the event, but I got some time off and would shoot for myself. And you've heard of all these people, and our spot was next to his. And I sat down, and you're trying not to bother anybody, or like, I was a little afraid to, say anything. And he just bumps me and is like, hey, how's it going? What's up? I've never seen you before. And just, strikes up a conversation. And I was like, I was used to the older photographers not talking to me for years. And this guy, first time I sit down at one of the biggest events there is, just is like super friendly, and you know, it was a shock. It was really nice.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Unless anybody's got anything else, stop me. Feel free. But really appreciate everyone sharing. Just want to take a minute because I know it sucks to be stuck at home alone, and nobody wants to be mourning alone. And figured we could share some stories and share a laugh. So really appreciate everybody being on here today. I think we'll try to do it again Friday, and if I can't find anybody, maybe we'll do Monday instead. If you got any other speakers you'd love to hear, or anything you'd love to see, Ben shot me a message about doing a thing on internships, and any other ideas you'll have, feel free to shoot them my way. I'd love to help do that. If you're interested in reviewing portfolios or having your portfolio reviewed, don't forget to shoot me a message. I'll be sending the ones I have out later today, and if I'd love to add you to the list and whatnot. The Slack is still in the chat for a second. If you'd like to grab that or just message me, I can send that along. Lastly, this will go on YouTube, and if you all could share it or know anybody that missed it that could benefit from everything Maddie shared with us, would love if you send it along to them and invite whoever. Thanks everybody for hopping on here. Thanks again, Maddie, for her time, and really appreciate you all being here, and see you again.
Thanks for having me. Thank you, Michael.
See you guys.
Thanks for hosting, buddy.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Don't you dare leave, Logan. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. You'll be the last two with me.
I'm not going anywhere.
You're first up in portfolio reviews.
Me?
Let's pull your stuff up right now.
Mine? Oh, let's do it.
No, let's
Dude, I gotta update mine. Did you got the link?
I'll look at it today.
All right.
All right. See ya.
Peace, brother.